What's up guys, Elijah here with another video, and if you want to have a totally new experience with Fallout 4, Obscurum 4 is a great new overhaul mod that you should absolutely try. The Minutemen have been overhauled with new loadouts and a new backstory, and most enemies have been replaced with members of the Commonwealth Separatist regime. This faction is the main enemy of the game and are the most common enemies that you will run into. There is currently a civil war between the Minutemen and CSR factions, and your role as an officer is to fight the CSR and carry out duties for the Marxist Minutemen. I'm playing this mod with all quests removed, and with the Enclave instead of the Minutemen, and we will talk about my load order later. Most guns and equipment in the game have been replaced in favor of more tactical FPS style weapons, and that's just the beginning. Combat has been overhauled to feel more like a shooter. Enemies are no longer bullet sponges, but neither are you, and combat feels a lot more like fast-paced and like a modern shooter. Starting is going to be brutal, especially if you install any weapon bundle mods that inject powerful weapons into the level list. Obscurum already makes both you and the enemies much less of a bullet sponge, and this means without any power armor or without stack DR, almost every enemy is going to be able to one-shot you. The enemy's AI is drastically improved as well. Enemies will no longer charge at you when it is clearly in their best interest to fire at you from behind cover. If you camp, as in stay in one spot, some of the enemies will try to sneak up on you, so keep an eye out for that. Settlements have been nerfed in a few ways. Some turrets have been removed and the cost of power and build some things have been changed. The most impactful nerf to settlements is that your settlers are now mortal. To make things even more difficult, the CSR raids can be brutal and include enemies with the capability to call in a nuclear strike. Sometimes they come down in parachutes in massive numbers, like I don't even know what the count is, but the battles get pretty crazy. When I was level 1, I had to literally just run across the map and hide from some of these raids. This all means that after some raids, you'll be left with a total of 0 settlers until you can start improving your settlers' loadouts and your settlement's defenses. And even then, they can die from an intense raid. The general combat AI is more aggressive as well. In some instances, I had a horde of CSR troopers chasing me from settlement to settlement while keeping a safe distance from me and firing from cover. And then when I hid in a building, they would go from building to building together, clearing the area looking for me. It's pretty intense. I noticed that once I got some decent power armor and found a random container with 20 fusion cores, it was a real turning point in difficulty, so I actually used the game configuration menu to upscale the incoming damage a little bit. I did start playing on survival, but because I had a video to make and it was taking way too long to explore the map, I scaled it back to very hard. The visuals and lighting definitely have some major overhauls. The entire world has greenery added to it. The exterior assets are a little dated, but don't let it turn you off from this mod. It's so fun. The minigun has also been overhauled and doesn't require heating up before firing. The DPS on this thing is insane. You can also loot a grenade from certain enemies that will allow you to call in a nuclear strike. Okay, so let's get into the factions. In the original mod, we have the Minutemen, which have been overhauled. The gear is just one part of the overhaul. Their name is a tribute to the first man who ever wrote the word the United States on paper. There are also sub-factions, the Minutemen Militia, the Minutemen Air Force, and the Minutemen Security Forces. The Minutemen are a Marxist regime, but in my playthrough I'm pretending that the CSR are the commies and that the Enclave are here to stop them. The CSR are the main enemy faction and you will run into them more than anyone else. They spawn everywhere and in large numbers. Here's what the mod says about them. The CSR are basically the Ayn Rand faction. They want rich people and corporations to control everything. They say that slavery is immoral, but they also think governments have no right to dictate morality. They believe in the old colonial system of the East India Company, where life in society exists entirely through a dominion of privately owned institutions where the core metric of success is cold, hard profits. You can learn more about their side by reading propaganda that's sometimes carried called A Nation Restored. Just like the Minutemen, they also have sub-factions. The structure of their army is basically a series of coalition forces represented by industrialists and corporations, ranging from arms manufacturers, mercenary groups, and the private armies of the rich and powerful. There's the insurgents, who are the people who you will encounter most of the time, run-of-the-mill paramilitary groups with conventional weaponry. There's the forlorn heat mercenaries, who are a foreign mercenary group that, among other things, have air capabilities. This makes them quite formidable. There's the Death Guard, who are an unknown benefactor to the CSR and represent some of the most dangerous technologies. Death Guards use advanced technology and orbital super weapons. They're quite rare, but also extremely dangerous. They also have access to infrastructure, which makes it seem as if they may have their origins in the pre-war military, or possibly one of the many companies who were contracted by the military. Pretty sure they're actually referencing the Gunners and Enclave there, but we're going to forget about that for my playthrough. There's the terrorists, who are basically loosely organized civilian sympathizers of the CSR, normally dressed in ordinary clothing, lightly armed, and sparsely organized. There's also these monsters that stalk you at night, and yes, they're usually invisible. And across the Commonwealth, some of the civilians you find will have assassin's orders to kill you. Fallout 4 Obscurum overhauls the game and turns settlements into command posts that you can raid to claim for the Minutemen as a commando. You gather special resources such as intel and weapon schematics to bring back to your base and turn into the requisition terminal. This is a special terminal that you can only find in Bunker Hill at the beginning of the game. You also find requisition tokens across the Commonwealth, which can be turned into this terminal in exchange for ammo, weapons, junk shipments, and other items. You can build them at your settlements, and one is already located at Bunker Hill for you to use. As of right now, there is no story, but the mod author says that he has plans to implement one. Okay, so now let's get into my load order, which is the Enclave versus Communist Regime Civil War. Like a lot of you guys, I've played through the quest of this game way too many times, so I installed a mod to turn the Commonwealth into an open sandbox. It works well with Obscurum because you're commonly dealing with intense settlement attacks that actually kill your settlers, so it feels much more like a war simulator rather than a settlement simulator. Although on survival, this feels a lot like Stalker. It's really hard. One of the most important mods to make all this happen is the Minutemen Enclave Overhaul. It would logically make sense to place this after Obscurum in your load order, but it only worked for me if I placed it before Obscurum. The power armor will not spawn on any of them, but there's a cool feature that makes this overhaul really cool for the Enclave playthrough. When you throw up a recruitment beacon, you will not only get normal settlers, but also Enclave guards that fully support the GOTE level injection, minus the power armor. Yes, they are also mortal in Obscurum. Due to the fact that your settlers can die and this load order is fairly difficult, I used Enclave Remnants Bunker as my main base of operations and settlement. I actually didn't even know the recruitment beacon could work in here until I made this video. To keep the playthrough balanced, don't use the free drugs in the medical bay. If you pop the seal on that, you're not going to be able to stop yourself from taking them for free, and that's not very balanced of you at all. The bunker does provide your settlement with free power, water, and food, so it's still a little bit unbalanced. But this load order has little to no vendors until you make them yourselves at settlements, and even then they can die. So the bunker provides some quality of life. I didn't go too crazy with the Enclave mods because I didn't want to break Obscurum, which has a lot of world changes. And when you install other mods that change the world, the conflicts can be pretty nasty. I did install the Hellfire XO2 and XO3 power armor mods because the overhaul requires it, but again, you won't see that on your Enclave soldiers and guards unless you put it on them. I also used Locky Bastard pretty much on any playthrough that is not Horizon. This allows alternate ways to open locks, including shooting and planting explosives. Some locks will become barred if you fail to shoot them open, however. The final mod that I would suggest is Weapon Debris Crash Fix. This stopped my crashes 100%. If you want my exact load order, it's going to be in the description below. So in the actual mod, the Minutemen are supposed to be the Marxists and the CSR are supposed to be fighting for corporations, but in my playthrough, me and my settlers and guards are the last of the Enclave in a world infested by communist militias. This is pretty easy to fall into when you're playing because you start off with very few of the Minutemen, which now obviously Enclave, but the world is absolutely just covered in both the CSR troops and communist propaganda. On a final note, I would say that you should play around with adding other tactical mods like West-Tech Optics and West-Tech Tactical Gloves. Uneducated Shooter would probably go well with this too. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have fun with this mod, and I'm interested to see if this would work with other Minutemen overhauls that exist. I'll see you on the next one.